Boris Johnson deliberately misled Parliament with his Partygate denials.
Yeah, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has, in the last hour, refused to comment on the report, which is due imminently.
Well, I can't speculate. Obviously, I haven't seen the report yet, but these are typically matters for the House, not the government, and it's the House of Commons and Parliament that would decide the appropriate course of action.
We're joined now by former Cabinet Minister and host of State of the Nation on GB News, Sir Jacob Rees Mogg, one of the former Prime Minister's closest allies. A very good morning to you, Jacob Rees Mogg. When this report comes out, and if Boris Johnson's resignation is a symbol of it, the leaks in the FT and so on, that he will be found to have misled Parliament, will you accept those findings and realise that the Prime Minister lied when he was in the top job?
Well, I think you've got to look at the fairness of the report, and you need to apply the Hoffman principle. You will remember that the House of Lords Judicial Committee, another committee of Parliament, decided that it was wrong for a judge whose wife was a member of Amnesty International to rule on the Pinochet case because of the appearance that it could be unfair. Now, what applies to one committee of Parliament seems to me to apply reasonably to another, and the chairman of this committee expressed her view before she started chairing the committee. Harriet Harman, that's right. And if you apply the Hoffman principle, she ought to have recused herself at the very beginning. The other issue you've got to look at is what was the Prime Minister told before he addressed Parliament. And I know this very clearly because I, at the time, was Leader of the House and had business questions every week where I was briefed on what was happening, what had happened in Downing Street during lockdown. And I was specifically told by officials that the rules had been followed at all times, with the all emphasised. That was what I was being told to say to Parliament. And if ministers can't rely on officials in the briefings that they give them, then it will be incredibly difficult for ministers to give any information to Parliament.
But I mean, but clearly, when you finally get to look at the report, and Boris Johnson has seen it, which we understand is why he's already stepped down, and actually you see the evidence, you see the findings that they found in there, as Ranveer was saying. If it is proved within the report that he did mislead Parliament, will you accept those findings?
Well, we'll have to read the report, which will be out in about 18 minutes, I think, and see what it actually says. We ought to be concerned about the leaks that have come from the committee. You will have read in newspapers and heard on other broadcast outlets.
But the Prime Minister himself has leaked it, hasn't he? Which may well in itself be a breach, the leaking of what he read.
The Prime Minister quite clearly hasn't leaked it. You may mean the former Prime Minister, but Rishi Sunak certainly hasn't leaked anything.
No, sorry, I meant...
But sources close to the committee have been quoted for a member of the committee or a member of the staff of the committee to brief on the report before it's published is a breach of privilege, one of the clearest breaches of privilege that Parliament has, and this is well established in parliamentary precedent. So we ought to be looking at where these leaks have come from. The former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has defended himself and he has stood aside from Parliament, but members of the committee and members of the committee staff giving briefings is a clear breach of privilege, which I hope Parliament will be looking into.
It's unclear what the consequences or punishment, you might call it, for Boris Johnson will be if he is found in this report to have misled Parliament, because he's already resigned. And so what do you imagine will be the consequences for Boris Johnson, if any?
Well, the consequence of this report is pretty severe for Boris Johnson. He was the Prime Minister. He is no longer Prime Minister. He was the Member of Parliament for Uxbridge. He is no longer the Member of Parliament for Uxbridge. He's already lost 2 jobs for it. What more punishment do you want? Apparently they're thinking of taking away his parliamentary pass, which seems to me to be a rather trivial and juvenile gesture.
Are you concerned that you could face censure as well from the committee because of the criticism that you've levelled at them?
I'd be very surprised. In 1978, the Houses of Parliament, House Commons, looked into the issue of privilege and contempt of Parliament and said that there was a very high bar for criticisms of Parliament because you had the issue with John Junor in the 1950s when he was summoned to the bar of the House of Commons for saying MPs were fiddling their petrol coupons. And this made Parliament look ridiculous rather than John Junor look ridiculous. And so I'd be very surprised if they went down that route.
And can I just ask you, how do you feel for the constituents of Nadine Dorries, who said she was going to resign, now is holding on because she wants to find out why she wasn't given a peerage that she apparently was promised? It seems completely unfair to those constituents that they now have a sort of empty chair that, the MP for their area, Nadine Dorries, is completely distracted and won't leave the job either?
Well, no, Nadine is an excellent Member of Parliament. I would have thought Mid-Bedfordshire would be delighted to be represented by somebody of the abilities and insights of
But we
Nadine
know that
Dorries.
she wants to leave, though, Jacob Rees Mogg. She said she was going to stand down, then all of a sudden she's staying in the job. Her heart clearly isn't in being that constituency MP.
But if you were to take that to its logical conclusion, whenever an MP says he or she is going to retire, you would say that they should do it immediately, and people give notice of retirement.
Well, Boris Johnson and Nigel Adams both said after Nadine Dorries that they would resign, and they've left.
I don't think this is a problem for the constituents of Nadine Dorries, who I'm sure she will represent assiduously as long as she remains the Member of Parliament. That I think the issue with her peerage is a separate issue.
OK, we're going to have to leave you there, but Jacob Rees Mogg, thanks for joining us this morning.